Welcome to the Respectful Workplaces in the Arts Respectful Workplace Training Session. I'm Laura Williams. I'm going to be facilitating this webcast session on some really critical content that employers and organizations across industries and across sectors have been grappling with, and that's how to manage, navigate, and contain behaviors and conduct that could constitute harassment and sexual harassment in the workplace. The objectives of what we're going to cover today include exploring together the reasons for the increase in the reporting of workplace conduct issues. We'll also discuss what constitutes respectful treatment. We'll look at the impact of disrespectful treatment on the workplace. We'll look at the importance and methods for setting conduct expectations. Review the relevant legal framework, so essentially what is the legislation that regulates conduct within the workplace, and then we'll discuss what really constitutes effective workplace communication. As mentioned from the outset of this webcast, it's become the reality for many workplaces that the reporting of disrespectful workplace conduct is on the rise. There are a number of factors that contribute to this reality for organizations, including the following. First of all, the social climate. Social movements such as Me Too and Time's Up have emboldened those who have experienced or observed incidents within the workplace that could be considered disrespectful or which could meet the threshold of harassment to come forward and make their concerns known. Also, social media. The manner in which individuals choose to communicate through social media, either within the workplace or when they're off duty, has led to an increase in the reporting of disrespectful conduct. It's become a thing, if you will, that individuals choose when they're communicating through social media platforms to be more bold with respect to how they may regard someone or comment on something, as opposed to how they may choose to communicate with that person if they were face to face. And again, this can lead to miscommunication or to just flagrant disrespectful conduct targeted or directed towards someone. Further, as most of us are aware, there have been periods of time where there have been a rash of high-profile, sensationalized cases that have really shone a spotlight on this issue, and in particular, what constitutes inappropriate conduct, which has, again, emboldened others to come forward because they feel supported and that they will get the support within the workplace, but at least socially, to bring their concerns and experiences forward to be addressed. There's another reality that influences this issue, and that's just a general lack of awareness of what constitutes offensive conduct. There's certain individuals that unwittingly may cross the line or somebody's boundaries by not having an appreciation of perhaps someone's cultural norms or the limits of their humor. And this isn't to excuse those behaviors, but certainly this can cause incidents of offensive conduct within the workplace as well. Another reality that's influencing the rise in reporting of disrespectful workplace conduct is the fact that given all of the legislation and the trends to enhance obligations that employers have to protect against this conduct in the workplace, employees have also increased their expectations with respect to the protections against unacceptable conduct within the workplace. So employees are expecting that employers and supervisors will take steps to ensure that the workplace is free of harassment, and when there is a harassment incident, that they will respond accordingly. Before we discuss how workplaces can be derailed by disrespectful conduct, it's important to consider what constitutes respectful conduct in the workplace. Respectful workplace conduct has many elements. Being friendly, courteous, and professional towards colleagues, maintaining the highest ethical standards, refraining from gossip and rumor milling, contributing to the efforts of the team and offering assistance wherever required, so maintaining an all-hands-on-deck mentality, cooperating freely and ensuring that colleagues and co-workers feel that they matter and that they're contributing, being honest, trustworthy, reliable, and dependable in fulfilling duties, using appropriate language and ensuring that you're communicating in a manner that's not offensive by swearing or being sarcastic, name-calling, or mocking, and complying with all conduct-related policies. Disrespectful conduct, and certainly conduct that would be considered harassment, can have a significant impact on the workplace. Some of the impacts that this conduct creates includes increased incidents of misconduct. So where these offensive behaviors are not addressed or resolved, they can spawn other incidents of misconduct. Higher turnover, individuals that have experienced this type of conduct or individuals who have observed the conduct may not wish to stay with that employer. Absenteeism, there could be fallout related to mental health or fallout that related to individuals feeling that they don't wish to be at the workplace because of the conduct that they're experiencing. It becomes harder to attract talent, particularly if the reputation of the organization is impacted because of the conduct. There could also be a significant negative impact on culture, with employees not trusting the employer to protect them against offensive conduct and incidents of harassment, or employees, just by virtue of how they get along, because certain behaviors that are offensive or inappropriate or disrespectful have become normalized, that it just becomes an unpleasant place to work. And again, reputational issues. Certainly employers' brand, their employer brand can be significantly harmed and marred if they become known as a workplace that tolerates offensive behaviors or doesn't take steps to ensure that employees are protected against harassment and other offensive conduct. Disrespectful conduct or conduct that could constitute harassment in the workplace can also have a significant impact on individuals who experience this type of conduct or who have observed this type of conduct in the workplace. Individuals can experience decreases in the fulfillment that they receive through their work, so there could be decreases in job satisfaction, morale, productivity, motivation, well-being, and other factors. There can also be feelings of powerlessness or helplessness, vulnerability, lack of feeling significant or diminished value. Also, there could be anxiety and shame and guilt related to experiencing certain types of behaviors that could constitute harassment or sexual harassment. Also, it's not something that's compartmentalized. I mean, certainly this can also influence external relationships, including family tensions, and social relationships can be impacted as well. Taking steps and implementing measures to set conduct expectations is one of the key and critical activities organizations should engage in to ensure that they mitigate against behaviors that could be disrespectful and, worst case, harassing or sexually harassing. By setting expectations, what an organization is doing is letting everyone know what they should do and what they should not do, so what's inappropriate and what's appropriate behavior within the workplace, as well as what their obligations are regarding reporting incidents and complaints. Also, there should be a very set reporting procedures so individuals know how to bring forward the who, what, where, and when that relates to an incident so that an organization can appropriately respond. Setting expectations in writing is critical. Employers need to be able to rely on, and managers as well, and supervisors, in bringing potential violations of written expectations to the individual's attention. They need to be able to rely on the fact that the individual knew or ought to have known what was considered to be appropriate conduct. The best way of setting conduct expectations in writing is from the outset through written contracts. Those contracts can be employment contracts or contracts that are extended to service providers with respect to independent contractor engagements, through codes of conduct, policies, performance discussions, and also external policies such as those established by unions, guilds, and associations. Whatever the written method chosen by the organization, there are certain key elements that should be conveyed to ensure that conduct expectations are clear. First, employers should communicate a general statement of values. This is a general, high-level statement of what is important to the workplace, such as zero tolerance for harassing behavior, creating a working environment where all parties feel safe and respected, and so on. Employers should communicate a general statement of conduct expectations. This can include the types of behavior we covered earlier as examples of what constitutes respectful conduct. The policy should include key definitions related to respectful behavior, and we'll review some of these later in this webcast. The policy should also explain the roles and responsibilities of different parties in the workplace, including managers and cultural workers. When setting conduct expectations, the employer's harassment policy should be referenced so that all parties in the workplace are aware of how to report disrespectful workplace conduct that may constitute harassment, that the employer is obligated to investigate incidents and complaints of harassment, that information will be kept confidential to the extent possible, and that cultural workers who bring incidents and complaints forward are protected from retaliation for doing so. The policy should explain any training that is available to cultural workers and managers. And finally, in setting conduct expectations, it's important to explain the consequences for failing to adhere to the policy. Let's now explore some of the legal considerations that come to bear when navigating harassment and/or sexual harassment within the workplace. Preventing workplace harassment and managing its impact has been a key focus of provincial and territorial governments and the federal government in the last few years. Governments have been creating new laws and amending existing ones to ensure workers receive increasingly effective and substantive protections against workplace harassment and violence. Generally speaking, protections from harassment in the workplace exist in two different kinds of legislation, either in occupational health and safety legislation, human rights legislation, and in most cases across all jurisdictions, in both. There's an increasing trend to more robust protections in occupational health and safety legislation that focus on workers' mental well-being as well as physical well-being. As mentioned, different provinces and territories have created obligations with regards to workplace harassment in different kinds of legislation. This chart depicts the legislation that applies and regulates harassment and workplace sexual harassment in the various provinces and territories. For more information, which sets out employers' and cultural workers' legislative obligations with respect to workplace harassment, the Cultural Human Resources Council will be releasing Respectful Workplaces in the Arts webcasts on harassment for each province and territory. Currently posted on the Respectful Workplaces in the Arts website are quick reference compliance guides which have been designed to provide employers with considerations to assist them in meeting their compliance responsibilities with respect to harassment and sexual harassment. As we saw in the previous chart, in some provinces and territories, workplace harassment is considered a health and safety issue. Treating workplace harassment as a health and safety issue acknowledges the impact these issues have on employee health and safety. It also places responsibility on all workplace parties to mitigate risks related to harassment. Occupational health and safety legislation is founded on what's called an internal responsibility system. I'll refer to it as the IRS. The IRS means that everyone in the workplace has a role to play in keeping workplaces safe and healthy, including employers, supervisors, and employees. Employees have to take reasonable precautions to ensure their own health and safety and that of their colleagues, and may also have an obligation to report incidents. Leveraging the IRS helps employers set the expectation that all incidents and complaints will be addressed. Let's now consider how legislation defines workplace harassment. It's notable that while definitions are not identical across provinces, territories, and federally, the following definitions are most commonly used and the general principles they contain are applicable across Canada. First, let's consider how workplace harassment is defined. Under most legislation, workplace harassment means engaging in a course of vexatious comment or conduct against a worker in a workplace that is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome, or it includes workplace sexual harassment. Let's consider some of the behaviors that have been considered to constitute harassment. These include verbal abuse or threats, unwelcome remarks, jokes, innuendos, taunts, and this could include about a person's body, age, attire, or other attributes. It also includes practical or dirty jokes which cause awkwardness, embarrassment, or offense, stalking, leering, staring, or gestures, displaying pornographic, racist, or other offensive or derogatory pictures or material, condescension, intimidation, or paternalism, which undermines an individual's self-respect, unwelcome or unwanted sexual advances, and this could include, but it's not limited to, patting, pinching, or brushing up against, or hugging, cornering, or kissing, fondling an individual, requests or demands for sexual favors, and again, other types of physical and or sexual assault. It should also be noted that there are a number of very subtle or insidious types of behaviors that can impact individuals psychologically, such as ignoring them or not including them or marginalizing them in the workplace, that could be considered harassment. These are always more difficult to detect and to respond to. You'll note that the general definition of workplace harassment does include some behaviors that could constitute sexual harassment, but certain legislation has a distinct definition for workplace sexual harassment that stands alone. Workplace sexual harassment can mean engaging in a course of vexatious comment or conduct against a worker in a workplace because of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, where the course of comment or conduct is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome, or making a sexual solicitation or advance where the person making the solicitation or advance is in a position to confer, grant, or deny a benefit or advancement to the worker, and the person knows or ought reasonably to know that the solicitation or advance is unwelcome. Let's consider some of the behaviors that could constitute sexual harassment. These could include differential treatment of employees or co-workers on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, verbal or written comments, jokes, teasing, and or other communication of a sexual nature, demeaning language based on gender or sexual preference, or graphic comments about an individual's body that are offensive and inappropriate. Other behaviors include the use of sexually degrading words to describe an individual, display of sexually suggestive objects and or pictures in the workplace, such as posters or postings that could be degrading, foul or obscene language and or gestures, unwanted physical conduct, such as patting, pinching, or brushing up against a person's body, a promise of better treatment in return for sexual favors, or indirect or expressed threats for refusal of a sexual request. So, for example, retaliation or reprisal for not complying with a request for sexual favors. Other types of misconduct that are considered subcategories of harassment are bullying and cyberbullying. Bullying is often used interchangeably with harassment, but generally bullying is defined as targeted behavior against an individual with the objective to demean and disempower. Cyberbullying is a type of misconduct that is plaguing workplaces now increasingly, and that involves bullying that is perpetrated through electronic means such as email, text, or social media platforms, and this type of bullying could occur during working hours or off-duty. Another important concept and definition that employers should be aware of is a poison work environment. A poison work environment can be created if there's been a particularly egregious standalone incident or comment, or if there has been serious wrongful behavior sufficient to create a hostile or intolerable work environment that is persisted or repeated. Generally, a poison work environment is created where there has been offensive behavior. It could be a standalone issue or incident, or it could be a repeated incident that the employer has failed to address, and then that behavior becomes normalized. Harassment that falls under and is regulated by human rights legislation is generally referred to as discriminatory harassment. Discriminatory harassment is defined as engaging in a course of vexatious comment or conduct that is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome, and which is based on protected grounds under human rights legislation. On this slide, you'll note that there are a number of examples of protected grounds in employment, and a number of the protected grounds commonly feature across jurisdictions in provinces and territories. However, certain provinces and territories have distinct and different grounds, so it's very important if you're operating in a province to be aware of the grounds that are protected under human rights legislation that applies. One thing to always remember when it comes to managing or containing conduct within a workplace environment is that when navigating issues of disrespectful conduct, good intentions don't excuse bad behavior. Just because somebody thinks they're joking or doesn't see anything wrong with their behavior doesn't provide them with a defense. And it does not mean that they have not behaved inappropriately and also in a manner that could attract legal consequences and create legal obligations for the workplace. Finally, let's discuss another really effective, proactive, and preemptive strategy that workplaces can employ to minimize risks of workplace harassment. So as we've covered, in addition to understanding legal obligations and ensuring conduct expectations are effectively communicated in writing through policies and codes of conduct, etc., and holding individuals accountable by imposing sanctions for inappropriate conduct, workplaces can minimize risks of workplace harassment by socializing with employees and individuals what constitutes effective workplace communication. It can be a real difference maker when employers invest in bringing in training to ensure employees understand how to effectively communicate within the workplace. Some of the key components of effective communication include understanding the importance of direct and clear communication, learning how to listen, learning the value of asking questions, understanding how gossip and rumor mongering can be harmful on the workplace and its culture, and getting the value of providing feedback, both positive and constructive. And this isn't only manager to employee, but coworker to coworker, just to enable that there's clarity in work expectations as well as conduct expectations. Workplaces with effective communication, both between supervisors and cultural workers and amongst cultural workers, experience decreased incidents of misconduct, lower turnover and absenteeism, and a positive impact on culture and reputation, which can really enhance an organization's ability to attract and retain the talent that it needs. Again, to ensure that communication is effective and respectful, employers can hold cultural workers responsible through policies, reporting obligations, workplace training, and applying discipline consistently when expectations are not met. Thanks for tuning in to this Respectful Workplace training session. We're going to be turning to the live portion now, where I'll be entertaining questions or any comments about the content that we've just reviewed.